Hi, my name's Eric, welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about Grimes. Today she's releasing her brand new studio album, Miss Anthropocene, and I am here to break down the lyrics. Typically I would do a reaction in addition to my lyrics breakdown, but this is a 10-track album and I have already listened to 5 of the tracks that were released as promotional singles, so I don't think it would be a genuine first reaction if I only we're actually hearing half the songs for the first time. So I'm just going to be focusing on basically my first in-depth look at the lyrics in this video, breaking them down and seeing what themes span the whole album. Before I dive into my analysis, let me know in the comments down below what your favorite Grimes song is, and please subscribe to be here when I post new videos every week. First, I wanted to explain the title of this album. It is a play off the words misanthropy and Anthropocene. Misanthropy is the hatred of human beings, and the Anthropocene is basically the period in which humans have inhabited the earth, and it is associated with anthropogenic, human-made climate change. Grimes has said that Miss Anthropocene is sort of a goddess of climate change. She embodies hatred of humans, and the idea of this central character on this album is that she wants to punish humans for what they have done to the earth. She revels in their destruction of the earth as part of their self-destruction. So knowing this about the title and having heard some of the songs on this album, there's going to be a lot of themes of self-destruction, of sort of global catastrophes, and apocalyptic imagery, just generally death and darkness. Also, I wanted to mention that We Appreciate Power featuring Hannah is not officially part of this release. It is a bonus track on the deluxe version of Miss Anthropocene, so I'm going to treat it the way that I usually treat deluxe tracks and sort of not consider it part of the canon of the story of this album. Track number 1 is So Heavy I Fell Through the Earth. She begins by saying, "Silly love, coming here when I said go, weigh me down, oh love." So first she has this character sort of negging her partner, basically beckoning them, while also saying, "I didn't actually want you to come back, but you are anyway. Now that you're here, weigh me down. You are a burden to me, I enjoy that burden." So we have this sort of self-destructive impulse with relation to love showing up right away. Then on the chorus she says, "So heavy I fell through the earth, 'cause I am full of love from you." Like I mentioned, this love is weighing her down. She is so heavy that she fell through the earth. To me, the only way you can imagine falling through the earth is by breaking the ground, destroying it. If she is this goddess, she is, sort of monumental in scale. If this love is weighing her down, she is watching the earth crumble under her with the weight of this, I guess, tainted love. The rest of the song does just repeat these few lyrics and doesn't really introduce any other lyrics. So this mantra in that way serves as, I guess, an introduction to the character of Miss Anthropocene. Maybe this explains why she became embittered. Maybe she had a love who treated her badly, and maybe that love was a human, and now this tainted love has turned her off to all of humanity, and now she is enjoying this feeling of falling through the earth, of, being destroyed and of destroying. Track number 2 is Darkseid featuring Aristophanes, who also appeared on the song Scream on Art Angels. Aristophanes is Taiwanese, so I believe she raps in Mandarin. Also, she sometimes goes by her real name Pan Weiju in case her name is listed differently on the track list. So Grimes starts the song by saying, "Unrest is in the soul, we don't move our bodies anymore," and she repeats that. So we are continuing from the sort of heaviness of the last track with this unrest, this tainted love, whatever sort of negativity is consuming her, and the heaviness now manifests as an inability to move, right? If you are being weighed on, you probably aren't very mobile. So she's saying this is just another form of that same sort of oppressive darkness. I have plugged Aristophanes' lyrics into a translator, and the translation, to be quite honest, is very rough, so I am going to pick out what I can. She mentions that her skin is invisible. She talks about not being able to see, and she is injured. The invisible skin says to me sort of vulnerability. We think of very young animals as having transparent skin, so it's this sort of exposure, which of course feeds into these ideas of injury and harm that are also appearing in these lyrics. So Aristophanes is just sort of supporting these ideas of damage and harm that Grimes has been talking about. To be totally transparent, I just spent a couple minutes looking at different websites, and a lot of them just transcribe Aristophanes' Mandarin lyrics as a question mark. So I don't have that much information about the other lyrics. I would imagine it is more about the same sort of idea of tainted love, injury, different images of bodily harm. And then what's interesting is Aristophanes sort of mentions the microscopic scale of injury, whereas Grimes's character, Miss Anthropocene, as a goddess, has this larger scope, right? So she is so heavy she fell through the earth. She is dealing on, again, a global scale, whereas Aristophanes is talking more about the body itself and looking at the skin and the flesh and the blood and things like that. And so it develops into this sort of full range of destruction, from the destruction of the individual body to the destruction of the whole world and a sort of collective body. If we are tying it back to climate change, people often like to imagine, you know, a sort of Mother Earth character, and if we anthropomorphize the Earth, then we are hurting the Earth's body. So it makes sense then that we have these images going on already this early on the album. Track number 3 is Delete Forever. I really like this song. I have heard it a few times, and this definitely is much more terrestrial and specific. So we have sort of a transition from the really large scale framing device generalities on track 1 to some more of the emergence of the body on track 2, and now a sort of individual human experience on track 3. So she opens the song saying, "Lying so awake, things I can't escape. Lately, I just turn them into demons." So to me, this reads as she is building up the struggles in her life into these sort of monumental, devilish things. Maybe in her nightmares or just generally in her mind, she feels like the things that are wrong in her life right now make her life basically hell. She says, "Flew into the sun," and talks about heroin. I believe she's drawing a comparison between using heroin and flying into the sun, the sort of Icarus myth idea of, I mean, you know, it's not hard to imagine just burning up, destroying yourself completely. And then she says, "I just turn them into reasons and excuses," which, compared to the sort of magnitude of a heroin addiction or literally being burnt up in the sun, feels a little casual. I think the clearest conclusion, though, is that these are just generally things about addiction, and so the heroin addiction feels like being burned up in the sun, feels like being in hell, causes restless nights, and, you know, becomes just a general impediment to living. On the pre-chorus, she says she's always down when she's not up as in probably high on drugs, which means that she's always down, and she fills her time with permanent blue. So even when she's up, she is blue. So when she's down, she's blue. When she's up, she's blue. There really is nothing good going on here. When she's not on the drugs, she feels miserable. When she's on the drugs, it's just another type of blue. There is no positive outlook. She says, "I can't see above it." She is sort of quagmired in this swamp of addiction, and she can't see out. And then she says, "I guess I love it," which is sort of the addiction talking, right? Because then she turns around and says, "But oh, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to love this. I just fell into this addiction." On the chorus, she talks about seeing everything, doing everything, and says that there are more lines on the mirror than a sonnet. To me, this brings to mind, like, I've Seen It All by Björk from Dancer in the Dark, where she's saying, "I've seen everything I need to. I'm ready basically to die." And I get a similar vibe here. I don't think that's necessarily exactly what she's saying, but she's more saying, like, I've been overwhelmed by the weight of the world. I've seen it all. I've done it all. I really don't want this anymore. The last line about the lines on the mirror is interesting because I'm inclined to think like maybe it's a drug reference, or maybe she's talking about actually writing lyrics on her mirror, but then it would be less of a pun to compare it to written lines in a sonnet because then they're the same type of lines. It could be that she's looking at her reflection and seeing lines in her face. She could be referring to lines as in sort of truisms that she spouts as a way of masking whatever's happening, ways that she reassures herself and tells herself that her situation isn't as bad as it is. I think this line though is generally open, and it has a lot of different facets to that pun that are really interesting. And as a poetry nerd, I always appreciate a sonnet reference. On the second verse, she says, "Funny how they think us naive when we're on the brink. Innocence was fleeting like a season." You know, someone might view a person with addiction as naive or as weak. Like, you were just this impressionable person, that's why you became addicted, you know, sort of looking down on the person for that reason. But what she's saying is, living in a situation where you are exposed to addiction and then become addicted, there was no innocence, there was no safety, you were never cloistered from it. There was always these sort of being thrust into adulthood by the presence and the knowledge of this addiction, because you never had the innocence of not being exposed to addiction. When she says lost so many men, to me that sounds like the sort of diction of like a military. So you say like, we lost so many men in battle. Here, she's sort of bringing up the same thing. Like, there is a battle against what I can imagine is the opioid crisis. And then the only other line that shows up is she says, "Lately their ghosts just turn to reasons and excuses." Again, that lyrical motif that showed up earlier. So again, this sort of downplaying. Like, she is not really seeing each individual death anymore. Like on the prior song, we saw more of the body, people's individual bodies suffering, and here that's sort of being lost, you know, like with this death en masse, like this sort of mass destruction, the warlike nature of it. It's less like, oh no, this one person died, I am now devastated, and more like a bunch of people have died. And it's not so much like individual grief as a thing to explain away, which then makes sense with reference to her talking about people sort of minimizing addiction and belittling people who are addicted. So as it goes along, I think it becomes clearer on this song that it is about the sort of mass destruction caused by an addiction crisis. Track number 5 is Violence featuring Io. She opens the song by saying, "I'm like begging for it, baby. Makes you wanna party, wanna wake up. Baby, it's violence." So moving from the last song that was more grim and like genuinely sad to her sort of reveling in destruction again feels like a sort of coping mechanism in a way. Like, if I can't control, I guess, the destruction around me, might as well embrace it. Because on the last song, she talks about always being down. That also showed up obviously on So Heavy I Fell Through the Earth and the following track. And so here when she says she wants to wake up, you know, it's sort of the reaction against that morbidity and complacency that showed up earlier. How do I go from lying down, heavy, asleep, immobile? I react with violence, which I think also makes sense with the military language on the prior track. Like, we have lost so many men in this battle against opioid addiction, so her own violence is like a reaction against the violence that has plagued her and the people around her. She says, "You want to make me bad, and I like it like that." Again, we're going back to the idea of the first song, the tainted love being something that she is embracing. She's embracing the feeling of being oppressed by this bad relationship. This song also repeats a lot, so the only other lyric that shows up is, "You want to make me bad, pay me back." So that, I think, gives us more of an insight into this relationship. It is a mutually destructive relationship. I want to hurt you because you hurt me, and you want to hurt me because I hurt you. It's sort of internecine. Had it been placed like third on this album, it would have been easily explained by the prior two songs, but when it immediately follows Delete Forever, it feels very different, and the darkness feels less winking and more like, oh no, there's actually like real darkness underlying this. It's not just, you know, her playing up this sort of, you know, evil caricature. In that way, it starts to feel more like resistance and like desperation, which is emotionally very interesting. Track number 5 is 4 a.m. She opens by saying, "Aphrodite, I wrote your constellation into the sky, suns at night." This is a sort of common idea. I think it shows up even on the song Drunk in LA by Beach House, sort of writing a message on the sky as a symbol of love. Again, she brings up a goddess because she's placing herself in a sort of pantheon. What's also interesting is the image of the suns at night, so of course we have a reversal. Okay, so before she brought up the sun as a symbol of her destruction, like from the Icarus myth. So then with the context of her talking about drugs before and now talking more about romance, I can only imagine she's sort of saying like, there's a sort of backwardsness here, a sort of perversion. I am, engaging in these indulgences late at night, and it is my destruction. Of course, we can expect that she is going to be reveling in that and celebrating that, but just in terms of our typical iconography, in a song or movie, you go out late at night and do something scandalous, it's your downfall, basically. So on the chorus, she's out at 4 a.m., someone says to her, you're gonna get sick. So like I mentioned, being up this late, it's not good for you. We especially don't like that in music, because if someone's out late, they're doing something bad. Then, of course, she says, 4 a.m., falling down again, I don't know when. I don't know when refers to when her destruction will come, but she knows she's in this sort of cycle. She uses repetition, again, very effectively to tell us, like, this is happening over and over, this is a pattern, I'm becoming basically nocturnal, it's not good for me, and I'm just waiting for the moment when I crash. And like most of these other songs, it just keeps repeating, which I think is especially appropriate on this song with the theme of cycles. Having heard the song, she layers these repetitions in a way that becomes very chaotic, and that also suits these themes very effectively. So this is just sort of another dimension of this self-destructive character. Track number 6 is New Gods. She opens the song by saying, you're all I know, but what can I do if I can't see? You're too bright. She's being very consistent here about how she uses light and dark. Darkness is kind of the thing that feeds her. Brightness is the thing that will be her destruction. She is talking about a relationship again here. This other person is too bright, maybe too good for her, or really just more like the midnight sun, like this sort of destruction that is alluring. She talks about broken glass that shines in all the lights, and then she says, so I pray, but the world burns. So the broken glass, obviously, shards of glass, dangerous, brokenness, destruction. Maybe broken bottles for more of that nocturnal sort of indulgence thing going on. But what she's saying is, the light itself is sort of made of brokenness, right? It is destructive and it is destruction. The light, the sun, the thing that you are drawn to like a moth to a flame is destruction. And so she's trying to find something to pray to. She's trying to find like some sort of comfort, some sort of guidance, and the world is just burning around her. But then she says, and still you need to come first. In this relationship, she's putting this other person's needs over her own, and she is saying, I might be praying, the world might be ending, but I'm going to focus on you. The you in this case is the brightness. She is being drawn to this destruction, and even when she's trying to turn to, prayer, to some sort of holiness and redemption, she is pulled away from that by this person or by this embodiment of death and destruction. And she basically reiterates that on the chorus when she says, hands reaching out for new gods, you can't give me what I want. Everything's going wrong, we're all looking for something to believe in, and we are grasping and there's nothing there. She talks about wearing black eyeliner and black attire like on Black Beauty by Lana Del Rey. She is embodying the darkness, sort of being the goth teenager, rejecting religion and being like, I only believe in destruction, I only believe in the light, and my light is death. And she ends the song on the line, you can't give me what I want. This is unresolved still. I don't know if this is really even referring to her partner anymore. This is more generally just her saying, I don't have direction, I don't know how to get what I want, I don't know how to feel satisfied, and like I have a higher purpose, I am basically just lost. Track number 7 is My Name is Dark. On the first verse, she says, we party when the sun goes low, imminent annihilation sounds so dope. Again, sort of like on Delete Forever, she's being casual about this destruction. She's saying, I don't really care. I might die from this partying, from this nocturnal lifestyle, but I don't particularly care. In fact, it sounds pretty cool. She says that she plays with fire. Again, she is drawn to the destruction, to the light that is destruction. And then on the chorus, she declares, "I'm not gonna sleep anymore," which is basically what she was hinting at on the last song. She is not sleeping anymore. She is just driving herself towards this, burnout from not resting. She has a lot of stuff on this song that feels pretty adolescent. She talks about, I don't need sleep anymore, that's what the drugs are for. Every city has a place like this. Underneath the bridges where the tainted kiss. Put on bullet with butterfly wings. She talks about, I'm not shy, but I refuse to speak because I don't trust you to understand me. It's sort of this very teenage diction that intentionally has a lot of sort of Valley Girl language, a lot of whatever sort of deal. So it feels like the song is very much about a young person, I guess, in this sort of midst of, other people turning to heroin, other people just dying, being destroyed, this, I guess, teenager losing direction, not knowing how to find meaning, so they're like, there is no meaning, I'm just going to be a nihilist and, wait until I drive myself to an early grave. Which explains then towards the end of the song, the angel of death is right behind me. Like in a horror movie, it's right behind you. It is imminent. She is ready to die, basically. So we're 3/4 of the way into the album, and I am really appreciating how consistent she is with the images that she uses, the images of religion and destruction and death and light and dark. It is very well mapped out in a way that is similar to Magdalene by FKA Twigs, just a very careful arrangement of images in a way that tells us exactly what she wants us to know. Track number 8 is You'll Miss Me When I'm Not Around. So in the first verse, she describes basically committing suicide. So she says, I shot myself yesterday, got to heaven anyway, think I might regret it now, tied my feet to rocks and drowned. So the sort of bookends of this verse are the different means of suicide, and then she's saying she got to heaven anyway. She thought that she was an unholy, tainted person. We got that impression from all these other songs, right? She is into tainted love. She, feels dark and she's only attracted to the darkness and to destruction and to evil. And now we sort of have some nuance introduced into that with her doubting whether that self-destructive impulse is something that she wants to follow. On the pre-chorus, she says, if you don't bleed, then you don't die, which to me sounds like she's saying, if you don't express vulnerability, then you can't be hurt. She says, cross my heart and hope to fly. Of course, a play off the expression, cross my heart and hope to die. It could be on the first verse where she says, I don't really want death anymore, I want something else, maybe I do want life, where she is questioning the, death impulse. Or it's the opposite, where she feels like the flight, the freedom is death. And then, of course, on the chorus, she says, last call, you'll miss me when I'm not around. Promise if I make it, I'll kiss you goodnight. Again, this sort of apathy as to whether she lives or dies. If I live, great. I'll keep doing what I'm doing. If not, then you will see me smiling from 6 feet underground, she says. And then an interesting detail that she closes the song with is changing from you'll miss me when I'm not around to you'll miss me when I'm down. Of course, that could be related to the 6 feet under image that is physically down, or again, tying back to the image of being down that occurred multiple times at the beginning of the album. And so generally the song feels like it's about depression and not just the, possible tragic conclusion of suicide, but more generally also you'll miss me when I'm down, when I'm depressed. You will miss me when I can't participate, when I can't be active because I'm weighed down by depression. So this Miss Anthropocene character, again, is sort of opening up into this vulnerable human. Track number 9 is Before the Fever. Again, we have heat here, which in a relationship could be the heat of passion, the sort of temptation that she was talking about before as being her destruction. So she opens the song by saying, please don't wipe the ashtray with the burning cigarette. Of course, cigarettes are like heroin. I mean, not quite the same, but an addictive drug that causes self-destruction. And she's saying not to snuff that out. She still wants this destruction to burn. This, has decreased in size from the sun to just the embers of the cigarette, but she still wants that alive. So then she is talking to this love, like, I can take your picture, this is the sound of the end of the world, dance with me to the end of the night, you know, just sort of typical, well, okay, not really typical, but typical apocalypse love song stuff. So again, that lit cigarette is sort of like the flame, the small flame of this relationship that I imagine is about to be burnt out either by the end of the world as a metaphor, I guess, for the relationship, like what Tinashe did on In Case We Die, or it's more literal in the world of the song, sort of like, let's keep this flame alive as long as we can. And then she repeats, there's only one way out, which again, I believe refers to death or to suicide. So this sort of feels like, if I'm going back to the sonnet reference from Delete Forever, a sort of like Shakespearean love story where it ends poorly for both of them and they die, you know, basically still in love. So then she closes the song, this is the sound of the end of the world. I get lost, can you get lost with me, baby? So her getting lost is like her looking into this light that she's been talking about, right? Like this sort of self-destruction, and she is beckoning this person to join her. So she's kind of circling back to where she was earlier. At the beginning of the album, she said she was in this toxic relationship, and you know, she sort of fed off of that, right? Like it brought her down, and that's what brought her pleasure, because this other person was her destruction. Then towards the middle of the album, she said that it was mutual and that they were both destructive to each other, and now it feels sort of more one-sided. Like it is now shifted entirely to her, you know, come with me and I will destroy you. The final track, track number 10, I believe is pronounced IDORU. So she opens by saying, you are the only one, feels so numb. Again, she is in this destructive relationship. She feels numb like she did on Delete Forever. She says, I feel something just to like release. And again, another image of her dying as the album ends. And then she talks about both her and her lover's fingers trembling, sort of, I guess, like a dying process together, or just, you know, a general kind of connection. She says, we could play a beautiful game, you could chase me down the way, even though we're gonna lose, but I adore you. So, like I mentioned before, she is tempting this person to their destruction, right? And she's saying, let's make it a game. You can chase me. Maybe we can go basically run into the sun together. We can both destroy ourselves together. And that is the manifestation of their love. And she says, we are gonna lose, which of course, you know, the game is to race to their destruction. That is the loss. Something interesting around the bridge is she says, unrequited love has reassembled me, and if you said I do, I'll reassemble you. So we sort of go back to that Shakespearean unrequited love idea. I don't know why the love is unrequited when it seems that this person is in a relationship with her, but it could be that she keeps beckoning this person basically, and they're not coming. Another thing that's interesting though is she said that unrequited love has reassembled her, and that she'll do the same thing to this other person. So I don't think it's exactly her beckoning them now. So what she's saying is, I was sort of made whole by the suffering of not receiving love in return, and I can do the same for you. For the low price of $19.99, I can reject your love. She ends the song by saying, there you are, hidden away. And again, she is trying to access this person. At the same time, she's sort of negging them just like she did on that opener. And then she just concludes by repeating, I adore you. So the album ends with this sort of one-sided declaration of love, with the sort of catch that, you know, I'm professing my love to you, I will destroy you, and maybe I can put you back together by actually denying you of love. The thing that'll save you is me not loving you. My love will be your destruction. So I wasn't expecting the album to end or really have this sort of scale at all. I really was expecting more of that sort of global scale, this sort of goddess. We didn't get that much apocalyptic imagery in terms of the actual action of the story. The action of the story really is the sort of intimate relationship. I talked about this on my reaction to Tinashe's mixtape In Case We Die, where The thing that makes a story of like mass destruction interesting is what happens to the individual people in that story. And that, I think, is what's happening here. And I think that makes it stronger lyrically. I think specificity is a virtue of good songwriting, and that is exactly what she does here. Part of what I think she does well, like I mentioned before, is much like FKA Twigs, she's very specific about what her images mean, and when she uses them to signal us to different patterns in the story. She has a nice mirroring that goes on with the story starting with her sort of being infected by someone's tainted love, and then it ending with her wanting to do the same to someone else, sort of like a cycle of abuse and trauma. Overall, I'm really impressed by these lyrics, and I look forward to listening to the album in full, in addition to the few singles that I've already heard, and to hearing Grimes' future work as well. So please let me know in the comments down below if there's any other music I should react to or analyze, and please subscribe to be here when I post new videos every week. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time, that's it.